I could liken you to a werewolf, the way you left me for dead. But I admit that I provided a full moon. And I could liken you to a shark, the way you bit off my head. But then again, I was waving around a bleeding open wound. But you were such a super guy till the second you get away from me. We're like a wishing well and a bolt of electricity, but we can still support each other. All we gotta do is avoid each other. Nothing wrong with a song ends in a minor key. Nothing wrong with a song ends in a minor key. The lava of a volcano shot up hot from under the sea. One thing leads to another.
Hello, this is David Anderson, and you're listening to Two Davids and a Bronwyn Walk Into a Bar. This is a special episode where we're going to be talking about werewolves and werewolf movies and 3 werewolf movies. Mr. Lawler, you want to take it away as far as what we're going to be talking about?
I would say it's probably two and a half werewolf movies, because one of those werewolf movies isn't really a werewolf movie per se.
You're right, and we'll get to that. Of like, I don't.
These were, for some reason, 1981 was the year of wolves and wolf-like creatures. Oh, I forgot to mention my wife's
Yes.
here. Hey,
Ow, ow, ow!
that was her
She's
howling.
been possessed.
She's just, it's time for her medication, I think. And she isn't really on the show all that much. She doesn't really podcast with me because she thinks we're all a bunch of losers. But
No, I am.
but if there's one thing she does truly enjoy, it's werewolf movies. And I figured, nice cheap Halloween tie-in. But this is a video show, so it will be video with lots of wonderful clips that you're probably looking at right now that I have no idea what I've put in yet. So we're talking about 3 movies from 1981. The Howling, directed by Joe Dante. Wolfen, directed by Michael Wadleigh. And American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis. So we should start off. Well, the first thing I want to ask Bronwyn is, why are werewolves your go-to creature for horror movies?
Oh, I don't know if they are. Yeah, they are a favorite, but because they are not undead in the same way, they're more like wild animals instead of being sort of like a cold vampire or a dumb zombie. You know what I mean? They're a little more exciting because they're the opposite of death. They're too much life. There's so much life they'll eat you and kill you.
You also said they're sexy.
They're sexy, yeah. See, that's sexy because they're alive.
It's the release of the id, is what it is. It's the primal animal that we all try to sort of suppress.
Yeah, there you go. That makes sense.
That's in kind of, I would say, in two movies that have no other connection but that, which are The Howling and and Wolfen. It is about this kind of what you just said, the release of some kind of animal instinct, something that's out there, and perhaps trying or attempting to try to control it.
I think there's a little bit of that in American Werewolf in London, just because of the fact that this poor nurse, like, she's basically putting up a lot of crap because the guy's cute. That's what it seemed like to me. Like, oh, well, you're cute. Here, I'll take you home.
So starting off with Wolfen, the movie was released in April 10th, day after our wedding anniversary, but many years before.
Yeah.
1981. Directed by Joe Dante, produced by Michael Finney, who is his longtime producer and produced his Gremlin movies.
No,
too,
you said Wolfen. You said Wolfen, not The Howling, I think.
No, The Howling.
Okay.
Did I say
I think you said I think you said Wolfen.
You said Wolfen.
Sorry, Howling.
Yeah.
Directed by Joe Dante.
Yeah, The Howling. Yes.
I'm confused. What are we talking about? The Howling.
Well, okay, now, first off, we have a screenplay co-written by John Sayles, who has a cameo.
Everybody has a cameo in this movie. I kept yelling at the TV of like, "Oh, it's him."
It's that guy. It's a bunch of people that Joe Dante always works with, like Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
And Dick Miller.
Dick Miller shows up, yeah.
And Roger Corman has a cameo.
Roger Corman, Forrest J. Ackerman shows up even.
Forrest Ackerman. It's a movie like American Werewolf in London that's completely conscious. It's a self-referential meta movie. It exists in a universe where werewolf movies exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
they're literally watching a werewolf movie at some point in the movie.
Yes, we keep cutting to it. We keep cutting to Lon Chaney and the Wolfman, and we watched the Wolfman on Svengoolie last weekend.
Yeah, there was a nice coincidence.
Yeah, it was a strange little accident that had occurred. It's a great movie. It's probably my favorite, actually, of the Universal horror movies. Dracula is very well made. I really dislike Frankenstein quite a bit because Frankenstein was one of the first books I ever read for pleasure, actually, when I was roughly 9 or 10 years old. And then I watched this movie, and it's so dumb. I feel like the screenwriters. I know I'm probably urinating on sacrament right now saying it, but I feel that the people who wrote Frankenstein only glanced at it and didn't really understand the implications of the actual story. They just turned it into a routine monster movie, and I just thought it was silly. And the ending, the way it is, it's not that great. But Dracula, much better.
Well, everyone said that The Bride of Frankenstein, the sequel to it, was the better one of those older Frankenstein movies.
Yeah, I suppose, because it's like we erased everything that happened in the first movie, and he's back to doing what he was doing.
It wasn't. It
so
also
now he's
wasn't
making
really constrained by the book of like trying to sort of tell the story of the book. It was its own thing.
It was its own thing, but also in the book, he wants to make a female version of that creature too.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he gets around to it.
There's the Kenneth Branagh version. I don't know the very
the Branagh version,
the muscular, loud, shirtless version.
He was using eels for the electricity in that one. And Robert De Niro. And he splits Helena Bonham Carter in two, and not in a good way. But for the Howling actually references Lon Chaney's Wolfman. Now the only issue we had with it was Chaney's weird stalking / flirtation. He's spying on a woman through a telescope and everything. He's like an American. And he's like, hey, how you doing? What do you know, fella? And he's like walking around, hey, that's some weird stuff over there. What's going on? Oh, it's gypsies. Oh, gypsies, really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's like got this whole fast talking high trousers thing.
There was a remake of like the Wolfman like recently, like 2010. With
Benicio.
It's actually pretty good. It kind of combines the old sort of style, the film noir, foggy kind of style of that movie, and a more sort of new style of just like blood and guts.
What was it you said about Benicio?
I said he already looks like a werewolf.
He did, and there was not a ton of makeup required for that.
Like Jack Nicholson and Wolf. It's like you don't need that much.
That was kind of what made it interesting. He's already kind of a scary looking dude, so you could literally see like the conflict of him trying to be human or scary, like he didn't even need makeup for it.
And we start with Dee Wallace, who is like this newscaster, and Robert Picardo in a very early role with hair, which is hilarious.
Probably a wig. It's probably already a wig at that point, because and this was the thing that I noticed about the movie of. It starts off kind of on a really disturbing note with all the the porn theater and the thing, and then she sees him and then he's shot, but then he disappears, and it kind of turns into almost like a Friday the 13th, where
she gets amnesia, she can't really figure out what's going on.
Now was that the part where she actually was bitten? Like where?
No, she was bitten at the end by I believe when they're escaping from the colony, her
and chaos kind of thing going on there.
And Bill, her husband, who's played by Christopher Stone, who became her real life husband later, he turned into a werewolf and bit her before he was killed himself.
Okay. All right.
So it's sort of a reverse of American Werewolf in London, but it's like there's a conspiracy thing going on here. There's a conspiracy element, but it's very cheeky. The whole thing is very cute because there's a wink to the audience with everything that's going on. We keep cutting to pivotal scenes on the TV of Lon Chaney and the Wolfman, and then cutting to various things. It's like satire. This is a different kind of humor than American Werewolf in London.
Getting his lines right in the bathroom mirror, and then he starts talking. He's like, "Good evening on tonight's show. We're gonna," and then
the Ted Knight guy.
Hey, how's it going? It's gonna be a great show.
He's like, that's a brave little lady you got there. We're all proud of her. And now back to the news. And it's just sort of, it's like you, I think that's John Sayles injecting humor into it. The book, I remember the book because my mother had it by Gary Brander, and it was not this kind of, it was a straight horror story about werewolves living in a planned community environment in Northern California. And in my review, which I'll publish shortly, which probably will be published by this point, I made this note because it's very similar in its style to the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where it's directed by Philip Kaufman, starring Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum.
An extremely scary and creepy movie for
Leonard Nimoy.
For a PG movie. That's like, you don't show that to a kid. That's a disturbing movie.
It is. And it's also a parody and a satire of this me generation psychology that was going on at the time, this new age psychotherapy thing. And also Kevin McCarthy's in that too,
like
playing a
half
cameo.
Second, it's basically a reference to like he's still out there and being crazy from the end of the movie to the end of that first movie. Yeah.
But The Howling it's a great fun movie, and also I gotta say, for the werewolf designs, these are the best. I like.
You think so? Because when I saw it, I actually laughed out loud.
Yeah, I thought they went a little.
I like the way they look. They're on two legs. They're kind of bipedal. They're
good,
anthropomorphic.
But it was the transformations that didn't quite. It was like I felt like they went a little overboard with the bladder, the air bladder things on the face and the hands and everything.
Oh yeah. That's a conceit of it, because for some reason, and I remember reading a review, all the victims do is just stand there and look at these people transforming. And even Bronwyn was like, "Why are you standing there staring at this guy transform? Run!"
Once it transforms, it looks good. But I noticed something in the crowd. I don't know if you noticed this. One of the consulting makeup people, Rick Baker.
Yeah, that's okay.
Actually.
Well, the story goes that John Landis had written American Werewolf in London a long time ago, but couldn't get it financed because nobody knew who he was at the time. He had to make 3 extremely successful movies for anyone to look at his script. He gave it to Rick Baker very early on, and he said, "Figure out a way to turn my characters into werewolves, and we need to see it. No cutaways. I want it with bright lights and everything." So Rick Baker thought about it for 10 years, working on it. He figured out his system, but then Joe Dante came to Rick Baker and said, "I want to make a werewolf movie." So Rick Baker used some of his technology.
Yeah.
He was going to use some of his technology for The Howling, and Landis flipped out. He said, "I own you. This is my project. I want you to work on my project." So Rick Baker got his roommate, Rob Bottin, to do the visual effects for The Howling, and Rick Baker supervised for him while he was working on American Werewolf in London.
It's not American Werewolf quality. However, I looked it up. This movie had a $1.5 million budget. And it is of almost Hollywood quality. It's like it's an Abco Embassy movie, so of course it's going to be somewhat cheap.
Even in 1981, this is one of the best.
It's like they went to the. I mean, for a cheap ass movie, it's great, and they
1.5, yeah, and I think I'm not really quite sure how the budget is allocated in that way, but 1.5 million. But the thing is, Joe Dante and Michael Fennell and John Sayles all worked for Roger Corman. So they knew how to make a movie cheaply. I think the first movie that Joe Dante directed was Hollywood Boulevard with Alan Arkush, who would direct Rock and Roll High School later. And he made it for Roger Corman. He made it. I think Corman said, "Here, I'll produce a movie for you, and I'll release it. But you have to use short ends, and you have to use sets that I've already used, the old Roger Corman way." Yeah. So Joe Dante always knew how to make a movie for very little money. What's more, on a profitability level, The Howling was much more profitable than any of the other movies.
Yeah, it made, I think I looked at it, and it doesn't sound like a lot.
It made $18 million on a $1.5 million.
That's literally like more than 10 times its budget. And then, of course, this was right as video was coming out. It was probably very popular. It was probably a very popular early video
and cable too.
Cable. That's where I saw it. Was cable.
But it's such a fun, smutty, exploitative.
It is, and I was traumatized by this movie because I saw it at the inappropriate age of like 10. And it starts off. It's already got these weird sort of sexual overtones that a 10-year-old shouldn't be seeing, and then it's got boobs. It's got boobs and then violence right after boobs. So I'm like scarred for life now.
Dee Wallace would just wind up being kind of like the mother in every situation. It was horrific. She wound up being a Cujo and
I felt
Critters.
bad for her because she seems like a genuinely like nice girl from the Midwest. And to see her going through this in this movie, it made me feel a little.
She's really good at panicking and freaking out. I mean, that's why she's in those movies, because she panics and freaks out really well. Then she disappeared. I don't know what happened to her after that.
I think she just
after Critters.
A Critter. Oh, she's in Critters. That's right. So I think she just kind of took her money. I mean, we've had this discussion about other actors that we miss and everything. Sometimes she
pulled a Steve Guttenberg and just disappeared.
Guttenberg's back. The Goot is back. I've seen him in stuff.
Okay.
But I think what it is you just like you work. You make a decent amount of money, you're like, well, I've done what I've needed to do. I'll take my money and I'll go buy a house and get,
You know what she did? She probably went off and had a real life.
go ahead and have a real
She
life.
had children.
Make some investments. You can just, and that's kind of what you should do. You shouldn't be hanging around there too much. People are crazy over there. So
Now, well, for me, The Howling is just basically kind of a series of in-jokes. It's a movie made by horror film fans for horror film fans. So in these the hilarious cutaways to different things, not just the Lon Chaney movie, but at the end when Dee Wallace turns into a werewolf on live television, they say cut to commercial, and it's a dog food commercial, which is just fucking hilarious to me. And then we get reactions from various people watching the TV.
The lady turned into a werewolf on
the news lady's turning into a werewolf. And it's just, and she doesn't turn into a werewolf per se. She turns into like basically some kind of a poodle. It looks like a poodle
animal thing, yeah.
It's like a doggy.
Now,
and she howls, and she's really beautiful. She's a beautiful dog lady.
The guy was not the guy, her sort of, I wouldn't say her boyfriend, but the other guy, the guy
whose girlfriend got eaten.
The guy who was also in the Disney movie Unidentified Flying Oddball. That's what I remembered him from.
Yeah, I think I recognized him from somewhere.
He's a director. His name is Dennis Dugan. He would end up directing a lot of Adam Sandler movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Dennis Dugan.
So he went from that to that.
But now, did he know that she was going to turn, and that's why he had the gun? And it was
I think they had it all planned.
She knew she was going to get shot.
She didn't want to be a werewolf.
Because he was hesitating on going through with the plan, but
there was a plan.
Like, no, we must go through with it.
But I love how nobody takes it seriously at the end. There are werewolves among us. There are some survivors in that from the blaze that happened at the colony. They're out there.
Yeah, because the woman with the long hair shows up at the end.
She says rare.
Yeah.
And
what are our credits rolling on? Our credits are rolling on a hamburger. That's not rare, by the way. I kept yelling at the screen. I said, it's done. If it's rare, it's done.
I said that too, but
he was overcooking it like crazy.
Ending. That's the kind of ending that my family, mostly my mom, would refer to as a damn son of a bitch ending. Which is
that?
It's at the very end you go, damn son of a bitch! So when we're watching a movie where it has that kind of ending, where it's like this sort of twist where somebody lived or somebody got away with something, it's like, that was a damn son of a bitch ending. With
Okay, moving on to Wolfen. What is it? Released July 24th, 1981, directed by Michael Wadleigh, who really didn't have any other experience directing except for Woodstock.
Yeah, from what I heard, he only kind of half directed this movie. This is one of those things where it was taken away from him,
Well, it was. I think it was taken away from him in post-production, because what I read was his cut was 4 hours long. So, and they were like, "What the hell is wrong with it?"
I felt so.
This is it's based on a book by Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion, and what was the other one that he wrote? He wrote The Hunger. And this was the first of his books to be adapted, starring Albert Finney doing a really bad New York impersonation, New York cop accent. Diane Venora, who is just striking in this movie. I love her face. Eddie James Olmos as a creepy guy with creepy eyes, and Gregory Hines playing.
Gregory Hines, probably the best part of this movie, even though he is somewhat of a racist stereotype. Like, he shows up with his radio.
I call him the soul brother medical examiner. And Tom Noonan, actually.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, it's Tom Noonan, yeah.
And you have incredible cinematography. The movie is gorgeously shot by Jerry Fisher and Panavision.
Yeah. We were discussing that before, of like
music by James
Horner. The one thing I
Horner.
really liked about the movie was it had that old style Panavision. It was like it's distorted, but you don't care. It's like,
I thought, there's a lot to like about Wolfen. I know you're going to have some issues with it. There's a lot I like about it. I like the style. That's more than anything.
Yeah.
I think I like the style of Wolfen more than the story is really. I don't know. Let's start with Bronwyn.
I mean, it's not really a werewolf movie as such. They don't really call it that, and it's not the same. It's not the same kind of thing where in the Howling, obviously they have a fear. Dee has a fear of turning into a werewolf, and in American Werewolf in London, same thing. There's like a fear of this thing becoming a monster and this happening to. That's not what's going on in Wolfen. This is played out more like a detective story. He goes through this long process of solving the crime, and it leads him to these kind of man-wolf creatures.
Are they man-wolf? I always thought it was the sort of the Native Americans, the First Nations people, whatever we want to call them. Indigenous peoples. They're sort of like almost like the conduit between humanity and I thought they were just wolves. I thought they were just wolves that were like.
I don't know. I did think there was a shape-shifting thing going on, but I could be wrong.
I don't remember there being a shape-shifting. I remember them like they were almost like they were there before even man was there or something. But they were almost like evolved.
Well, Edward James Olmos insists that he's capable of shape-shifting.
He never does though.
And he
just sort of runs around.
He runs around naked, weird eyes, stuff like that.
And the movie has a more serious tone and a more serious theme.
Yeah, there's no humor practically, except for Gregory Hines. I guess he's comic relief.
But even something about it, and they take a long time to develop the story. There's something about it overall that's more laid back, more grown up than the other ones. Maybe
the music is good. It's a James Horner score. It's like almost like every score he would do later would be a ripoff of this score. He had like about 3 or 4 scores, like his first 3 or 4 scores, like Battle Beyond the Stars, this, Star Trek 2, and then everything would just be a ripoff of that in some form or fashion. So this is like...
It would. There's a lot... Actually, this score is very similar when the wolves are attacking. It reminds me a lot when the aliens attack. Exactly.
When I heard it, like, he's ripping himself off later, yeah.
But I love... Also, this is an old New York. This is a New York that we no longer live in. Over here, everything is... But I have... My main problem with the movie is the motive. I write in my review that the scenes of contemporary Bronx, it's all buildings torn apart, devastation and destruction. Why are you going to protest the demolition of this place when they're building up better, safer, more practical properties?
Because the wolves are going to lose their...
Maybe they should consider moving up north.
The wolves were their prey. I think they explained it like their prey is the people that won't be missed, like homeless people.
It takes place in a metropolis.
Yeah.
It takes place in New York, you know. It's like you want to go back to nature, you know, you got to travel about 3 hours outside of New York, you know. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, also a very violent movie as well. And this is another movie where it's weird too, because the head cop gets his head cut off by a wolf. It happens in American Werewolf in London as well.
And if you notice, like there was a discussion about how, I think it was Gregory Hines talked about when people would be beheaded. I think he's the one who says, like, when people would get beheaded and their heads would stay alive for like a minute. And if you notice, when the guy gets beheaded, the head kind of I think they cut it down, but it's still moving, and like the face is moving around, and like the mouth is moving.
Yeah.
I think there was like some, but it's done so quickly you don't really notice. But I think they were trying to kind of go for a point there.
Oh yeah. Definitely clever. Now, Wolfen was the most expensive of the movies, of the wolf movies to be released. It was a $17 million budget, and it only made back $10 million. So it was kind of a flop.
And it was one of those Orion Warner movies.
Yeah, it was made by Orion. I got it on Blu-ray as part of the Warner Archive collection, and it's a very nice transfer. It's a very nice transfer. Now, the third movie here is my personal favorite of the three, and it still is. I just watched it again recently, and I looked at the making of it just to get some of my facts straight. An American Werewolf in London, written and directed by John Landis, back in 1969 when he was working on a movie called Kelly's Heroes, starring Clint Eastwood, Donald Sutherland, Telly Savalas, Don Rickles, Harry Dean Stanton. He shot it in Yugoslavia. Well, the director, he was a gopher on the movie, and he was, according to him, he was out walking with a friend in Yugoslavia, and he happened upon a gypsy funeral. And the gypsies, he noticed that they buried a man who was a criminal. Apparently he had done something absolutely horrendous. So he was buried feet first into a grave that was roughly about 15 feet deep. And the reason he was buried feet first, they talked to some villagers, and the villagers said he was buried feet first so that he would not rise from the grave. The reason why is because there were legends of zombies and werewolves. So he wrote this story about the undead, and he wrote the script. He tried to shop it around. He couldn't get it made. He had to make Kentucky Fried Movie and Animal House and Blues Brothers, which were all enormously profitable. And then he was able to get script work, and he even worked on, I believe he worked on a James Bond movie for a very brief time for Cubby Broccoli. It was never used, but he was paid.
You're saying John Landis was in a James Bond? He was somehow in a James...
He worked on a James Bond movie.
That had to have been when they were starting to hire Americans, like the Tom Mankiewicz time, like the in 71, 73, like around there in the last Connery and the first Roger Moore. That feels...
I think I have it here. The Spy Who Loved Me, I believe.
Oh, that's a little late. Actually, no, that might have been as Tom Mankiewicz was leaving, and he's like, I need American talent. I need somebody. Yeah.
Well, they saw the thing was his script for American Werewolf in London was circulating around, and people were saying, "Hey, this guy can write." Mm-hmm. So Broccoli brought in a bunch of other people, including Anthony Burgess, who had written the novel of A Clockwork Orange. But they never used his script or any version. I think they used parts of his script, but when they brought in the final writers for The Spy Who Loved Me. So anyway, the point was.
Yeah, what was the point?
I went completely off. I wanted to mention the Bond connection because David's a big Bond guy.
Oh, okay.
I've never heard of that.
So,
I'll have to go back into my special features on that and see if I can find that out.
He finally got the opportunity to make it. He had to make it with British money. There were a lot of tax breaks that he could use working on it if he had a British crew. He managed to cheat a little bit with Griffin Dunne and David Naughton as Americans in the roles. But the British wanted like a movie star or something, otherwise they wouldn't fund it. But he managed to get it funded through the Edie project.
Excuse me, David Naughton is a movie star. He was so well known from those Dr. Pepper commercials.
Yeah,
it was almost like him trying to undo it. I mean, he did that other movie, Midnight Madness.
Madness.
He literally, they do a little Easter egg. He's drinking a Dr. Pepper in one scene in that movie.
Yes, he is. Yeah, I remember that.
And it's like a wink and a
Very
nod.
cute.
So he's already like, he was so popular. That was so popular. To see him.
He had a TV show too.
Well,
remember, he had a TV show called Making It
with the hit single
with the hit song.
The single was
the
the
hit
hit.
song.
The show lasted like 4 days.
I love this movie so much. And again, like I said, it still holds up, and the makeup effects still hold up. It's basically just and it's so clever. The whole damn thing is so clever because it's done in a kind of an upbeat tone because of all the music that's involved. Mm-hmm. This is like one of the first movies to use some pop music in it. I mean, he had done it before with like, a period movie like Animal House, but he was being self-referential in the use of the song Blue Moon 3 times. And he wanted to use Blue Moon. He wanted to use other versions. He wanted to use a Bob Dylan version, but Bob Dylan wouldn't let him because he was a born-again Christian at the time. He wanted to use an Elvis version of Blue Moon, but Colonel Parker wouldn't let him. He tried to use Cat Stevens' Moonshadow, but again, Cat Stevens believed in werewolves at the time.
Well, Cat Stevens believes in a lot of things that aren't true, but...
All right.
So it's a very clever, slick, sexy, stylized werewolf movie. And it's horrific. Now, you said before, David, that you were absolutely frightened by the Howling. I was completely traumatized watching Griffin Dunne get torn apart by a werewolf. It comes down to, I think, Landis's belief when it comes to horror movies is that we can never believe that we're being attacked by a werewolf, and we can never believe that we are going to become a werewolf. It sounds ridiculous. So part of that, so the humor of the movie comes from even referencing the Wolfman. There's a discussion between David Naughton and Jenny Agutter where he talks about the movie with Lon Chaney. And he also comes up with a rather peculiar, I think, wonderful theory that werewolves can only be killed by people that love them, which is why at the end of the movie she says she loves him. And I think there's a kind of a nod, a tongue-in-cheek thing. Meanwhile, Naughton is being visited in various states of decomposition by Griffin Dunne, who is warning him that he's going to become a werewolf. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's just it's a tragic love story. It's horrific movie, and also very, very funny to boot. And that's one of the reasons why John Landis couldn't get it sold, because they said it's too funny to be a horror movie and it's too scary to be a comedy.
This is part of the reason why I like The Howling a little bit more, is because for some reason I felt, maybe it was because of the Jenny Agutter character, I felt like her just blindly kind of going along, and it's like, well, here, I'm a nurse, I'm gonna take care of you, you're cute, so I'm gonna take you in, even though you're obviously mentally ill because you're talking about being a werewolf and all this other stuff, but I'm gonna take you in anyway. And,
well, it's a little unbelievable. It's kind of like a little boy story. It's like,
and so,
there's no way that a beautiful nurse is going to take you in and have sex with you, right? I mean, but everything is unbelievable.
I know,
but
I
getting bitten by a werewolf, turning into a werewolf.
For some reason, like, this is supposed to be, in a weird way, it's supposed to be more rooted in a reality, whereas The Howling is this sort of hyper reality. So for some reason, the motivations of the characters seem to make a little more sense in the reality of that.
Well, yeah, the Howling is more fantasy, I would say. The Howling is more labyrinthian.
So
fantasy.
it's like anytime they try to like go, I don't know, something about like, it's almost like I can buy a werewolf, but I can't buy a nurse just taking a guy in. Like, I can't believe that.
So you think that's unbelievable?
That's
okay.
Unbelievable. Werewolf, I can believe, but this.
Well, what Bronwyn, what did you think of American Werewolf in London?
No, I loved it. I didn't really. I saw that. I was young when I saw. I didn't see The Howling, and I didn't see Wolf until I was an adult. But I saw this one when I was a young teenager. I didn't see it when it came out. I was way too young when it first came out, but I saw it later on, so I was a little bit more accepting of everything that happened, as you are when you see something when you're a kid. So I didn't really question it. When I first saw it, I think I thought of it more as a scary movie, and then like when rewatching it, I appreciated the bits that were funny. And I love Jenny Agutter. She's because I love that movie Logan's Run, so it was fun.
Oh, she's hot in that one.
Her.
She's hot in that one. Mm.
She's extremely beautiful, that woman.
But yeah, and of course I like Griffin Dunne too. I love him as a sarcastic corpse, kind of running around, trying to shame David into doing the right thing.
Which is silly. I mean, like, if you're hearing this, yeah, you're turning into you're going to turn into a werewolf. You're going to kill people. You don't want to hear that, and you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, like, suggestions from the peanut gallery of the various people you've murdered as to how to kill yourself. I mean, it's just, it's dark.
Yeah. That was very great dark humor, especially with the happy, peppy couple sitting in the movie theater.
Yeah, all covered in blood, because that's the kind of people they were. They were happy people in life, so they're going to be happy people in death. And then there's also this wonderful culture clash between Americans and the British. The British are so damn stoic in the movie, and they're like, it's like they speak in all these idioms that are, and it's like there's a hatred of Americans. There's an annoyance of Americans.
Well, we're annoying.
And there's tolerating Americans in some way. He's trying to get arrested. I love the scene where he's trying to get arrested.
Yeah,
he's like, Queen Elizabeth is a man, Prince Charles is a faggot, Winston Churchill was full of shit.
Didn't they put some sort of, like, at the very end of the movie, they put some sort of, like, I'm not going to call it an apology, but like we gratefully acknowledge the royal family or something like that. We congratulate them on their marriage.
The wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Di.
It's almost like they put that on there. It's like, please don't sue us, please.
Right, because their wedding happened that same year, actually. Yeah.
It happened. I believe it happened as they were shooting. That's why I think they put that there. And they also there's the wonderful thing about similarity to persons living dead or undead.
Yeah, which he would later then use in Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Yeah, and it was Michael Jackson hired John Landis because of that movie. Mm-hmm. He hired John Landis. He wanted to turn into a monster. He didn't care how he was going to do it. They made a music video around it, so it was really quite stunning to look at. But this one is my favorite for those reasons, and it just also wonderful. There's a lot of subversive stuff going on in there too, like the crazy scene, the nightmare that he has of his family being murdered by what look like Nazi demons, Nazi ghouls. I mean, it's like weird kind of Jewish anxiety running throughout the whole movie, even from them speculating on whether or not he's circumcised. The two nurses are talking about his penis, and it's just. So what happened was, I think Peter Guber and John Peters ran Polygram, and they financed half the movie. The British Edie Fund financed the other half. The budget was $10 million. The box office take was $62 million, which was more money than the other two movies, but not quite as profitable as The Howling, being such a low-budget movie. And I believe mainly it was because of the cast, which was made up of some very distinguished actors from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and also the visual effects, which took, I believe, his transformation scene took a week to shoot straight. And it seemed to have been a production nightmare for both David Naughton and Griffin Dunne to have to go through all this makeup work. But the results are stunning. It's an exceptional movie. It's my favorite of the three.
I liked it. It's like right below. I thought it was weird how I didn't think I was going to like The Howling as much as I liked it, and I thought I was going to like American Werewolf more than I ended up liking. I did. It's like it's just below. It's just below Howling for me. Wolfen is way down at the bottom, although that has some interesting things in it, I would say.
So this was like an exceptionally fun year for werewolf movies, and it happened at a time when we were all way too young to have been able to see these in the theater. It's so much fun. I mean, like, it's a lot of fun. I mean, maybe Wolfen not as fun.
Wolfen would be more fun to watch in a weird way. Wolfen would be more fun to watch if you had like a Warner clamshell tape of it and watched it on VHS like late at night, and then
I'm trying to find it. I've been trying to track it down for years.
You go back in time and you're like 12 years old. then that's what you really need to do. He's like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Wolfen was on ABC, their ABC movie, and it was cut.
I'm sorry.
Cut to pieces. And
well, we were talking about ABC and how they would seem to always use like the rattiest print they could get.
Okay, well, I'm gonna wrap it up. Anybody have anything further, Father?
I had fun watching these movies. It was so weird because this was a spur of the moment where we had discussed it, but then all of a sudden you said, we're doing it this Friday. And I didn't know. I didn't know when we were going to do it. So I was like, oh, okay. So I actually watched what did I watch? I watched Wolfen and I watched The Howling like in one day. Like the day you said, like, we're doing it. I'm like, oh, crap. So I watched them that day. And then I'd actually seen American Werewolf just by accident. Somebody wanted to watch it. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll watch it. So I happened to, like, within a week had seen all those movies. So it's so fresh in my head. This was an interesting thing to do. I don't know. Is this the only thing we're going to do for Halloween? We're going to do other things for Halloween? Is this our Halloween show?
I have no clue. All I know is I have a lot to do, and I needed to get it done because I wanted to have it out there at least a week before Halloween so people could watch it if they wanted to. That's why I wanted to jump on it right away.
Our tens of listeners that listen to actually like our show, love our show. These are great shows. So people, if you're listening to our show, please tell your friends that we're doing a show because we like people.
Tell your friends that there's a show.
There's a show. These are great shows. We're a couple of plucky kids. We're trying to put something together for you, do something entertaining so you can listen. Maybe you can watch it. You'll see the clips and everything. And maybe both of us can get actual jobs from this. Some like, you guys are awesome. We're gonna make you a star.
Speaking of stars, I want to thank my wife, Bronwyn. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
thank you. I love these movies. It was fun to watch them and talk about them.
All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.
Aren't you gonna say good night?
Good night.